Hey everybody, Dr. Dan here, and welcome back to class. What we need to do right at the beginning of the class is we need to get into a little bit of history and talk about some dates and stuff. And I won't hold you to remember these, although I might, but it's just important you understand how things stack up in history. So, if we're talking about is healthcare a right or a privilege, one of the things we need to think about is what did the founders think? What was their intent? So when we think of the beginnings of the United States, we think of the Revolution, the Revolutionary War. We think about the Declaration of Independence. We think about the Constitution, all that stuff. And so that's what I want to talk about. I want to look at some of those really important American documents and see if we can get any hints of what the founders were thinking about as far as this idea should the citizens have a right to good health, which really derives to this idea should the government take the responsibility of making sure citizens have good health. So first of all, let me talk about the Declaration of Independence. 1776, that's the big year for the Declaration of Independence. It's written by Thomas Jefferson, but understand we weren't the United States of America when the Declaration of Independence was written. So it's really not a set of laws at all. It's not a set of laws that we follow today. What it is it's a declaration of war. It's telling England, King George at the time, that we want to break up with you. We're tired of not being represented. We're tired of an overbearing parliament. We're tired of a tyrannical king, and we no longer want to have anything to do with England. So it's really a declaration of war. It's important in this case, though, because it sets the stage for what the founders were thinking. So let me read the preamble to the Declaration of Independence really quick, and excuse me if my eyes veer away from the camera because I don't have this all memorized. So the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So think about that for a second. If there are some unalienable rights, which means rights that are permanent, they're natural, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, well, certainly the right to life means something. You could derive that it has something to do with health, because if you're sick and you're dying, then you're not going to have life anymore. So you can draw some conclusions from that. It's important to think about. And it certainly sounds like Tom Jefferson, when he was writing this, intended that everyone has the right to life and they have the right to happiness, or at least the pursuit of happiness. So maybe healthcare is worked in there in some way, but maybe not. But that's an important one. So that's the first document. The second document is the U.S. Constitution, which was written by James Madison in 1787, but it wasn't ratified by all the states until 1788. The Constitution is really important because the Declaration of Independence is a cool historical document, but the Constitution is a living document. It is a set of laws under which we live today. So all of the laws in the country, all of the amendments that came after the original Constitution, they're all put against this test of what it says in the Constitution. In other words, you have the right to free speech, you have the right to freedom of religion, you have the right to public demonstrations. Those things are the core rights of the country, and they're all established in the Constitution. But as far as healthcare is concerned, and the Constitution, and when Madison was writing about this, what was his intent? We're going to look at the preamble of the Constitution just like we did the Declaration of Independence. So the preamble of the Constitution says, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution for the United States. So think about this for a second, and really the key word for me there is promote the general welfare. Now, that sounds great, but we need to know what welfare meant. So when you look at a definition of welfare, and the best way to do that is to go to Noah Webster's dictionary, which was written in the 1800s. So it's the wording and the meanings of the words that would have been in place when Madison was writing the Constitution. If you look up Noah Webster's definition of welfare, it is exemption from misfortune, sickness, calamity, or evil, the enjoyment of health, and the common blessings of life, prosperity, happiness applied to all persons. So now that we know what the word welfare meant back in the day when the Constitution was being written, and we go back and we look at the preamble of the Constitution, and they're talking about the general welfare of the people, it sure would seem to us that Madison was thinking that all citizens have a right to the general welfare, or going back to the definition, exemption from sickness or misfortune. So we can kind of derive some ideas from these preambles, the Constitution being the most important one. But the other thing we have to keep in mind, sort of on the flip side of this argument, is that liberty is talked about in both of these documents. And if you look at the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, it's really the government telling you you have to buy insurance, and if you don't buy insurance, we're going to penalize you in your taxes. So what kind of liberty is that? If I want freedom and I want to be able to do my own thing, then the government shouldn't be able to force me to do anything. So that's sort of the flip side of this argument, and it makes it incredibly difficult to determine what the founders meant when they were writing these documents, which really were the framework for the nation. So I just want you to think about that stuff. I think it's important that we understand when the country started in 1788, what the founders were thinking and what was important to them. Now, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we need to think about. Even if the founders thought, hey, you know what, we're going to cover everyone for healthcare, that's great. Well, back then, healthcare was pretty inexpensive because they didn't know what to do. There weren't any sophisticated pharmaceuticals whatsoever. The big procedures were amputations or blistering or bleeding or putting leeches on you somewhere, and this was not expensive stuff. So compare that to today, when we have these very sophisticated, very expensive procedures for curing cancer, or for getting scans, or for medicines that can save someone's life that cost $10,000-$20,000 a month. It's not the same thing. There's no way the founders could have looked forward to today and said, wow, this stuff's expensive, maybe we can't afford to cover everyone as far as healthcare is concerned. So I just want you to think about those things as we move forward in the class. You should know what the Declaration of Independence was, a declaration of war. It came first. You should know what the Constitution is. Of course, it's our living framework for our laws, ratified in 1788. And then sort of the next biggie date, just to kind of allow you to stack this stuff up, is 1860 or 1861 to 1865. That's the Civil War. We're like, we're a ways off from that, right? So we're like, we're like 50, 60, 70 years off when we talk about the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. But just keep in mind, because as we go through these modules, sort of the big eras or the big periods of time, the founding of the country is one of them, and then the next time we revisit really sort of this notion of some sort of insurance to cover soldiers, we're going to be talking about the Civil War. But there's a lot of stuff that's going to come in between that we'll talk about first. So that's it for this week. We'll look over the Constitution, we'll reflect on it, we'll look over the Declaration of Independence, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Be safe, have a great day. Bye-bye.